Hello, everyone, and thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurial Truth. On today's episode, we have James with us. And James, in an effort not to butcher your last name, can you pronounce it for me?
Certainly, it's Scottish by origin. It's Erskine, Erskine, James Erskine.
Perfect. Perfect. James, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I want to start this episode by asking you to let our not audience know who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Of course, yeah. Well, I'm James. I've worked at Rocket for 16 years, and Rockets are a marketing and content business. And we have specialized in helping brands reach young people and families for about the last 10 years. Wherever there's a young person involved in the decision making process, that's where we lend our expertise. So it could be in the education sector. We do a bit of work in the entertainment space. We do quite a lot of work in the publishing space and some toy brands as well. And the work that we do for those brands, and they could be Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Goliath Toys, Kings Into High, or a global online school. And the work that we do encompasses creative content, human experiences, so experiential activity, and then media partnerships across all media. We run social media activity, whether that be organic or paid. And we've also been running influencer marketing campaigns since 2012. And during that time, I've worked for two other businesses, a digital audio network, which was the first UK podcast network. And I also created an influencer marketing business that was the first brand focused influencer marketing business. I've had some successes, some failures, but Rocket has been the constant throughout that time.
Ooh, awesome, awesome. No one can do it as good as you can. And I'm glad that you dived into everything that you do so everyone knows all the ins and outs. James, let me ask you a question. How have you seen the marketing space change in the last 5 to 6 years?
Good question, because 5 years has been a really key time because social media has been a constant in our lives for actually quite a long time. But trends in social media, particularly since COVID, have changed. So TikTok, whilst it was big, was nowhere near as big as it is now. And a lot of that was caused by different people's habits changing during the worldwide pandemic. Every influencer decided to play with their TikTok account. Every user gravitated towards TikTok just to fill the hours. So a huge change has been TikTok. More broadly than that, I think the way that social media is being used has also changed. So whereas before, perhaps people of our generation may go to search engines to search. Well, Gen Z don't do that. Apparently, 60% of Gen Zs go to social media to search first. So, social media has become the new search. And that's a big change, not only in user digital habits, but also the sort of content that people want to see from brands has to be social first. So that's another big change. And then in terms of marketing, I think it's about how brands are behaving. So brands now need to have the right tone of voice for the right social platform and the right tone of voice for other media. So we're lucky at Rocket. We work across media. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that we are just as adept at delivering TV and outdoor ads means that we're better switched on to deliver better social ads, because you have to have an understanding of what all the different channels are doing.
Mhm.
And then the final thing I would say is a big change is in influencer marketing. There was a huge rush. We first did our influencer activity around 2011, 2012. So we've been working in that space for a long time. And there was a big rush. to work with big talents. And that rush has sort of changed now. Big talents are still very important, but it's a different relationship audiences have with big talents than they do with smaller talents. So I would say it's about niche content at scale. It's about tapping into communities. So those have been the big changes. And then I think one other that's worth noting is the rise of podcasts. I am either the best entrepreneur in the world or the worst entrepreneur in the world because my podcast business I exited many years ago before podcasts were ever really a thing. And they are now a really important channel. And audio is in my blood. I've always loved the way that radio works and the way that audio works. And seeing podcasts developing as a channel across international territories is really exciting. So those are the big trends, I think.
Oh, and there's so many things I want to dive into. I don't even know where to start. I'm like chomping at the bits. Let me ask you this, right? So, in the last 5 years, marketing has changed a lot, right? In the last year, we've seen the rise in like AI, in terms of AI on different platforms. How hard is it to get your message across when you're fighting with, right, or against? You're trying to, scale your content, but now there's so much AI content. For example, on YouTube, everything is automated.
Yeah.
How are you getting found or helping your clients to get found?
Well, no, you raise a really good point. There's always been an awful lot of what I call content landfill. So there's been a
Hmm.
lot of content that's been created where people haven't really been sure of the purpose of that content and haven't really been sure of what use that content has. So, and that's happening more and more with the
Yeah.
rise of AI, because you're right, AI can create relatively compelling video content. I think AI is an opportunity for brands and for marketing businesses, but I also think you do need to have the human touch there. You have to have a gatekeeper, or else you're going to find AI videos where people have got 6 fingers, not 5 fingers. Computers don't know everything and they don't have a knowledge base. But how do we help brands to stand out? One, it's about having an understanding of what the reaction to any piece of content should be. If it's the 30-second video on TikTok, we know that we're not going to convert anybody in 30 seconds. But
Right.
what we might do is make people feel warmer to the brand. Now, sometimes we may be migrating them from TikTok through to a brand's website. And on a brand's website, we can create a longer form piece of content. So it's about an understanding of which touch point you're on, which platform you're on. And then it's also about marrying that with the culture of the platform to make it as native as possible. So it might be that influence content works best for you on TikTok, but glossier content works better for a brand on Instagram. It depends on the story you're trying to tell. So coming up with a content calendar, a brand tone of voice for each individual platform, and an understanding of the job that you're trying to do helps gravitate audiences from one touch point to another touch point and helps them get immersed in a brand ecosystem. And then the other thing I'd say is you've got to have a trusted tone of voice. You've got to be trusted and known for something. It doesn't mean you have to have a purpose. It doesn't mean that you have to know about everything. It doesn't mean that you have to talk about every subject, but you do have to be known for something.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you're in that space now. My apologies. Okay, so right now you've been working on your business for 10 years, and we've talked about how it's changed from the company's marketing, but how has it changed as an entrepreneur being in the space in terms of growing and scaling? Is it at the same pace, or are you finding that it's changed significantly?
I think there are some similarities with some challenges. I mean, I've actually been working with Rocket for 16 years. So I wasn't a director. I'm now the only director and a shareholder with one other at Rocket. So we've been through growth. We've been through reduction of team members. We've made some bad hires. We've made some good hires. We've had people go off to other businesses. So I followed the journey, blood, sweat, and tears of being an entrepreneur with Rocket. When you added the influencer marketing business into that, we actually scaled to around 60 members of staff across both businesses. So it got really big. Right now, Rocket is at the size where I really like it. We're agile enough, we're nimble enough, and the clients that invest in us and trust us to deliver for them are clients that we've worked with for the most part for quite a long time. So we've got good relationships, and relationships are very much the backbone, I think, of any entrepreneurial journey. The next thing that's really important to any entrepreneurial journey is team members and loyalty. Look, we've just had a member of the team leave, our head of production, Max. But there were tears because he was a great member of the team, but he's worked with us for 9 years and he's moving to New Zealand. You can't kind of mitigate for that. And we've had some incredibly loyal servants to the business. My colleague Sophie's worked with us for 9 years. So that loyalty, and if you can instill that loyalty in people in the team, then I think that's really, really important. And that's been the saving grace of my professional career. Managing to develop relationships with the right people, people that won't leave and take your clients, people that won't leave and go and set up in direct competition, people that are loyal, honest, and have a respect for you and a respect for the work they've done and a respect for the business. The other thing that's really helped me is giving people autonomy and being innovative. So we delivered YouTube ads within a week of the YouTube ad product going live. We've delivered podcast campaigns for years, influencer marketing campaigns for years. So we've always been kind of ahead of the curve on the latest marketing trend. And that's good for clients because we're testing and learning all the time and we're building up a significant amount of data and we know what works and we know which influencers work hardest. But it's also really good for the team because the team can then feel, I'm a realist. I know not everyone's going to work for our business forever. But
Mhm.
what you do want is you want people to acquire skill sets that are transferable, whether they're transferable within our business or for whatever they go on to do with their career. So by being innovative, it means that our team are always learning and always progressing and always feeling like they're ahead of the curve themselves. So that's been my kind of key experiences.
Mhm. And how do you actually hire, right? So finding the right team member is important, right? But how do you how do you know when someone is not the right fit for your company?
It's something I have not been great at. It's taken a lot of learning. I have definitely hired people and then tried to make them fit within the business. And sometimes it's not been good for them, and it's definitely not been good for the business. I think the key thing that I look for is constructive optimism, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a can do attitude. Those are the key things. Now, they're attributes that people can fake in the first instance. They're
Mm-hmm.
attributes that people can, not until you really drill down, until you really know whether they've got it, whether they can roll their sleeves up. So it's a tough one to identify and a tough one to analyze. How do we recruit? We don't recruit in that much different a way. It tends to start with a conversation with one of the team, a short chemistry conversation, see how good they are. We then go into a more of a team focused task where they present quite deliberately to 3 or 4 people
Love
because
it.
that shows what they're going to be like and how they're going to respond to a real problem. And then we tend to go for a cup of coffee or have a conversation with them outside of the office.
Ooh, love that.
And there we can really kind of drill down into personality, chemistry fit, and things like that. So you're kind of trying to get as much as possible as you can in a hiring process of a 360 approach. Now, that doesn't always get to the bottom, and you're not always going to know what motivates people. And everybody's very different. You don't want cookie cutter people being part of your business. You do want different people that are motivated by different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that you have to have an understanding for that. Not everybody's going to be the same. Some people are going to be motivated by share options. Some people are going to be motivated by drinks trolley on a Friday afternoon. And neither are wrong, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about getting to grips with what really floats people's boats. In terms of getting it wrong, I've definitely got things wrong in terms of an understanding of loyalty. I've definitely got things wrong in terms of HR. I've definitely got things wrong in terms of not knowing how people are going to behave when the pressure is on. So, and sometimes I haven't acted quickly enough to say to those people, take the sticking plaster off. It's not working for you and it's not
Mm-hmm.
working for us. Why don't we walk away? And I
Mm-hmm.
actually think if I was to have my time again, I would have had more of those conversations earlier on. It's not working. Let's go our separate ways. And that
Mm-hmm.
way, everybody gets to go with their head held high.
I love that you brought that up. I love that you brought that up. Knowing when to let go
Yeah.
is critical in a business's success.
Yes, completely. And the right people for now might not have been the right people for your business even 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes businesses are in a different stage of development. They pivot. I'll give you a prime example from my experience. We had a very big client of ours, and we built a studio that was perfect for that one client. And the studio resource that we had broadly built was next to useless for almost any other client that we had. It
Wow.
was about creating very quick turnaround, high spec TV ads. And we did that job for the one client really well. But actually, for our other social first clients, it wasn't the right production resource. So, guess what? Agency life, you're always going to lose your biggest client. And
Mm-hmm.
luckily, they weren't our biggest client when we lost them, but they left, they went elsewhere. We'd worked with them for 8, 9 years. And our studio resource was not set up for our client base at that time. So
Wow.
we had to do a very serious job of finding people that were social first, finding people that could create 2D motion graphics that could work on social media that hadn't been the same production and creative team that had worked previously. And that's just one example of finding the right people at the right time.
Wow. Wow. And how do you manage such a broad spectrum of employees? Because, everybody's motivated by something different and everybody has different skill sets. What are some key tips that you can give our entrepreneurs in terms of managing a broad spectrum in order to make your business flow the best way?
I think, look, I'm going to blow my own trumpet here. I had a colleague, friend, and fellow shareholder of the business, my colleague Sophie. I would guess 6 years ago, she said, I think I have reached the end of my time with Rocket, with the business. And one thing, I took that as a huge compliment that she felt able to say that to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing. Being able to foster an experience of open, transparent conversation doesn't always work, and I haven't always got it right. But in this instance, I thought that was perfect. Now, what I then did was I asked around the industry. I kept it discreet, but I said, I know someone super talented who might be looking for a job. Will you have a coffee with her? Will you see her? Will you have a conversation? And my colleague Sophie had a conversation with a few people in media marketing, some at agencies, some at brands, and she scoped out the market. And broadly, together, we fulfilled what her next perfect job would look like.
Wow.
And we built that for her within our business. Now, we were lucky that we were able to do that. But what it meant was I got about 5 more years out of working with Sophie, someone who is the most talented person I've ever worked with. So she was worth moving mountains to keep. But it made it a really, really transparent, organized process of building the right job around individual talents. Now,
Wow.
I'm lucky. I've worked in relatively small businesses for the last 15 years. So we were a team of 20 at the time, and we were able to come up with the right job spec. So how do you manage other people? You can't do that for everyone. Understanding what people's motivations are, understanding how people will react to different situations, different client wins, understanding what motivates their loyalty, what's going to make them be carry on working as hard for you as they can, and yeah, wherever possible, being able to have those grown up conversations. What aren't you enjoying about your job? If you were to lose one element of your job, what would that be? If you were to do more of one element of your job, what would that be? And I
Ooh.
think people really respect you for that. I think people are really good when you have those one on ones. And then the other one, and this is a much simpler tip, don't try and manage too many people. If you can
Mhm.
delegate, I, Sophie and Max both reported into me, and most people then reported into them. We try not to have more than about 3 people report into anybody else, or else I just don't think that's that healthy. We've again got it wrong in our organisation where we've had the wrong people reporting into the wrong people. And it's about having an understanding of the emotional intelligence of the people before you pair them together. Not every manager is equipped to manage every kind of person.
Mhm.
And one of your jobs of joining the dots from kind of a higher position is to say, I'm not sure they could plug into that person. I'm not sure they'll click and get the best from each other. So yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
And have you ever used any emotional intelligence tests in order to see where each employee is?
We've not done that formally. We are very big on looking at motivations of individuals, and we've also done workshops on how people learn and how people process information. I I'm quite funny. I worked in commercial radio, then I became a media planner buyer. That's my background. I still think in spreadsheets, even now. I everything is a spreadsheet, and I'm not big on kind of P&Ls, but I am very big on what does the investment look like, what does the delivery look like. I'd much rather look at a schematic than a set of slides. Other people we work with are a lot more creative and a lot more visual than me. So it's about understanding how people work. At our quarterly meetings, I will regularly present a spreadsheet. My colleagues will regularly present some slides and some images. That's just how different people work. And it's about understanding how people are consuming that information. In terms of how emotionally intelligent they are, I think it's about finding out about their motivations and about how they receive praise, how they receive constructive criticism, and then how they respond to that.
Wow. And do you find that a team of 20 versus a team of 60, you have to have more or do you have less like teamwork activities? One, that's the first question. And two, do you as a company actually have a lot of outside activities in order to build that kind of culture within your business?
We are lucky. I'm a very firm believer in being quite transparent with the team. So the team know when we've had a good quarter, the team know when we haven't had a good quarter. The team know what's working for us and what's making the most money, whether it be content, influencer. We've just opened an office in Dubai, and that's proving to be a really profitable profit center. And we've kept that as a separate standalone business. And that's working really well for everybody involved. What I would say sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, is being too transparent. So,
Hmm.
what can an account exec do if your business is not making money? They are not in the position to win pitches. They are not in the position of making clients deliver more revenue. So, sometimes it's about an understanding of how different people can respond to different business challenges. At our quarterly meetings, we do tend to have an activity. We do regularly go out as a team. We do regularly have informal conversations. So I think it's no different to when you have 20 people or 60 people. I actually just think it's about making sure that the opportunities are there for people to talk to other people from other departments.
Mm,
There is there's a very we're very good on Friday meetings presenting work that we've delivered that week, because even in a relatively small business you sometimes don't know what one half of the business is doing when the other half of the business
same.
is doing it.
Oh, say that
And
again.
it's so, and I'm guilty of this, right? I'm a founder, but I didn't know we did that, or I'll see something on
Hmm.
social media. I honestly, I've sent round work before to say this is really good, and they said, James, that's one of ours. I've been so guilty of not having an understanding of the sheer breadth of work that we're doing. And that can happen. It doesn't matter how small the business is. And that also is true for pain points within a business. We've had, whether it be creative work, whether it be a new offering, whether it be an HR issue, we've had one side of the business sit on a problem and not voice it to the other half of the business. And I think wherever you can to foster that communication, that is certainly something that, yeah, it's a work in progress, but I certainly believe in the importance of it.
Oh man, you've dived into so many areas that are so important for entrepreneurs. Like, it's okay not to beat yourself up about, that issue specifically, but
Yeah.
solving that is huge. Communication between departments and knowing what one department is doing is so important. What are some things that you've helped, or tools that you've helped put in place to actually assist in that somewhat?
In terms of communication across the business, or in terms of, um,
Mhm.
I think that I go back to creating the opportunities for everybody to have their voice heard.
Okay.
So we do anonymous surveys within the business. We
Oh,
do have a chain of command where if you have a problem, you can put an anonymous email into an email address and it will
really?
say, I don't think we're doing this very well. Here's a way of improving it. So we do have that. And
That's brilliant.
that I think has been really, really constructive. And we've had some things there that where we've opened our eyes and thought, oh yeah, that's a really good shout. And we've had some before where people have said, I don't need to be anonymous. I just want to be able to raise this in a constructive way. So it's funny, we're going through a bit of period of change right now with our Dubai office, with our Dubai business, and some of the team are saying, I think we would be better doing this particular thing a bit like this. And I'm a firm believer, right? The next big idea that changes our business is probably not going to come from me. It's probably going to come from one of the team. What we have to do is foster an atmosphere whereby it can come from the team, whereby they are empowered to make those suggestions, those conversations. And I'm a big believer in this. People using their naivety and their ignorance to the best of their ability. Often, when you get a new starter start and they go, why do we do it like this? It's like, don't know, we just always have. And the best thing that that new person can do is, well, I don't get why we do it like this. Why don't we try something different? And that naivety and that ignorance can be so powerful. And it's the one bit of advice I give to anybody in the workplace. If you're coming into an industry you don't understand, if you're coming into a sector you don't understand, asking the simple questions, the dumb questions, is often the most valuable tool. And then the other thing is about external advice, external support. So I'm lucky. I'm pretty old. I've been doing this for a while. I've got a decent network of whereby if I wanted to solve a business problem, I could probably ask 5 or 6 people, have you been through this sort of experience? Whether that be financial, whether that be raising investment, whether that be tax credits, stuff, anything like that. I'm fairly sure that there are people in my professional network and people quite like being asked for advice. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and there are lots of entrepreneurs I've spoken to that are either do mentorship, or they're in some sort of peer group, something like that, like peer groups of other professionals in the same industry to be able to help them.
Completely. Yes. Yeah. I think peer group is really important. And people in unrelated sectors as well. It's
Hmm.
often more valuable. I've got a very dear friend that works in a finance business, nothing to do with what we do on a day to day basis, but often with business challenges, I'll chuck those sort of questions at him to get some real fresh perspective. I think some of the best agency founders are the people that have never worked in an agency before because they rip things up and they show things how they could be done, not necessarily how things are done. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point around peer group. I also think, just while I'm talking, I think it's not an unfair thing to say, particularly for your listeners, that not everybody is a natural entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Some people are founders, some people are ideas people, some people are entrepreneurs. The very few amongst us, and by the way, I don't count myself as one, are all three. I really enjoy the client work that we do. I really enjoy the running the agency work that we do. The running the business thing leaves me quite cold. I quite like coming up with new ideas, but not everybody. And what I would say is sometimes the best founders are the ones that get out the way and find really good people to run the day to day of the business. You might find that if you want to focus on the idea generation, get out the way and get someone in to run the business. So, yeah.
And an important note on that one is if you are a founder and you do, like, for example, you're the creative of it, you need to make sure that the person that you bring in to run the business is qualified to run the business too,
Yes,
right? Because
completely.
sometimes stepping out of the way can be disastrous.
Mm. Oh, completely. Oh, I've handed over control before to people that were no good. We've pivoted the business too quickly into. I'll give you a really transparent answer to this. When social media was looking like a future and the only way brands were going to spend money, we pivoted too quickly and too aggressively into being a social media only agency. And it was to the detriment of our clients, to the detriment of our offering, because we weren't considering a 360 approach. But do you know what else it was to the detriment of? Our bottom line, because the margins in paid social ads are less than the margins if you're making creative ads for other media. And it was great winning all this budget and making hardly any margin on it. And it nearly crucified us. So you're so right. You're so right to, to notice that and to raise that point.
Hmm. And sometimes people feel like they're so late to a market, right? So they end up, again, either it's one end of the spectrum. You either go too early, right? Or you sit there feeling like you're too late. For example, this revolution into AI, you know, jumping into the AI space in terms of doing more where that is concerned. A lot of people are feeling now that they're late into the space, but sometimes it's good to just sit back and
Oh,
just watch and see what's going on first before actually diving in.
so much. Some of the best brands, some of the best businesses were nowhere near the first mover advantage. Some of them, you're right, sat out the bun fight and then came in afterwards, almost taking best practice from what the industry hadn't been delivering before. There's a huge business in the UK, a friend of mine runs it, called Motorway. They are effectively a way for people to sell their cars. Now, that is the least revolutionary thing in the world. There are so many other brands that do it. But the way that they do it is in the most revolutionary way, and it's transformed the customer experience. On a much smaller scale, the way that we started doing influencer marketing is now pretty much the industry standard. There we were first mover. Now, in the way that we create TV ads, we do it in a much more cost effective way than many others in the industry. So you're right, it does take all sorts. And I do believe you're quite right. Second, third mover advantage can often be better for businesses, both big
Hmm.
and small.
Yeah. And they can listen to podcasts like this too and get information from all these different entrepreneurs. And they can use that information to help them with their business because sometimes you don't know where, as an entrepreneur, to find the information, how to get it, what to do. And sometimes you don't have the network of people to draw it from. And what I like about this platform is that we have great minds like yourself that have been through it, that have grown businesses from the ground up or worked with businesses and know how to scale, and have done it wrong, have done it right, but essentially can provide the information. What are some maybe four or five really great tips that you think an entrepreneur listening to this podcast right now would take away and really implement?
I suppose the first one is understand technology and the limitations of technology. So that's thing one. And I'll give you a story to illustrate it. When I had my podcast business, I was taken out by a tech provider and told you need a technology play as part of this business. And I said, I'm scared. I'm not a tech person. I'm a media person. I'll do the relationships. I'll rely on other people's technology. And then about a year later, a business called Acast came into the podcast advertising marketplace and wiped the floor with everybody. Now, I was lucky. The deals that we had with our podcasters meant that Acast paid us money to run ads across our podcasts, and we did very well out of it for about another 2 or 3 years. But if I'd have had the technology in play, then I would have been a lot more successful. But you juxtapose that with our influencer marketing business. There, we were trying desperately to be the first influencer marketing platform. And I was running the managed service side of the business. So I wasn't massively involved in the technology side of the business. But one, it was incredibly late. By the time we nearly got close to a minimum viable product, there were about 4 or 5 tech operators out there. And two, we spent so much money on the technology development that we were borderline capsized and the business fell over. So it shows I've been stung with technology by not being there and by being there. So having a real understanding. The second big tip outside of tech, I would say, is a theme I've come back to: loyalty. Having an understanding of how can you foster loyalty. And that goes both ways. That goes from you as an entrepreneur, you have to believe in the team and give them autonomy and to have an understanding of what motivates them and be loyal to that team. And the second thing is, how do you foster loyalty from them? And then the third point, and this is just a really tough one, is have a sense of your identity outside of work, because don't get defined by what you do as a job, because it might not be there forever. It might not be there next year. You might not always be an entrepreneur. You might not always be in this industry. And I found certainly that my identity was far too much involved with work. I'm a father of two. I've got an amazing wife. I've got incredible friends. I would now, if you were to say, what do you do? I'm much more likely to say, well, I get to go to the theatre. I've got an amazing family. I'm a lot less defined by my 9 to 5, by my career. And then I suppose the other big tip, I think I'd go back to something else I've said, which is don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions and question stuff. Often your gut instinct could well be correct.
I love those. I love those. There's so much width and breadth to being an entrepreneur, and being afraid of asking questions or having or list asking questions. One, listening to what your employees are saying,
Mm.
right? And being able to take the constructive criticism is one of the huge things, right? So going back to what you were saying about dumb questions and stuff, um, how have you and how has your team been able to take and use that criticism, constructive criticism or questioning, right? Like I'm not sure if I know how to phrase what I'm trying to ask, but essentially, oftentimes when someone presents something to you, how do you actually take that and implement it, right? Without being defensive.
No, it's a really good point, and everybody's got an ego, right? Everybody's got the right amount of, and I'll start with me because I can most confidently answer for me. It's a work in progress.
Okay.
Sometimes you think you have written the best pitch in the world,
Okay.
Sometimes you think you've got the best new business idea in the world and it goes nowhere. We launched a service a few years ago about influencer marketing research. So, research into influencer marketing campaigns that was powered by influencers. And I thought it was a really good opportunity. And we couldn't sell it. Clients weren't ready for selling it, for buying it. The team didn't feel empowered, and it's still in the background. It's still being talked about, but it's not something that flew. And I was convinced it was one of the best ideas I'd ever had. So it's one of those where, yeah, you just have to be able to see the realism around any idea. I've had big creative ideas in brainstorms that haven't made the pitch, and therefore you just have to trust the team that are talking to the client what's going to work. So I think just taking that on board, I've had constructive criticism. I've been told by members of the team I'm not hands-on enough. I've been told by some members of the team over the years that I'm too hands-on. So you have to understand that everybody's different, and just listening is key. How do other people respond to criticism? I think as long as it's delivered fairly, right? So I
Mhm.
don't think anybody is going to try and deliver a bit of information to be deliberately cruel or deliberately undermine anybody. I think as long as people know that you're coming from a position of one, I want the business to do well. Two, I want you to do well. Three, I want the best for us and our clients. As long as they know that's the position you're working from, then I think people are more likely to take on board, oh, okay, maybe we try that way. And then compromise is key as well. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. And where do you see your business growth in the next 5 years from?
Good question. One thing that we haven't been is anybody's agency of record. We've never been that. We have never been the strategic agency for any of the brands. We've been slightly further down the food chain. Now, because of the current team, we've got an ex-Ogilvy person that's now heading up our client offering. We've got my colleague Sophie, who's heading up strategic vision. What I'm finding is we're getting further up that food chain. We're becoming more of a agency that joins the dots. We know where the work we can do, and we know the work that we can't do, and we're not afraid to introduce other partners, other suppliers. But what I do see our business growth happening is having those bigger conversations. So planning out the year-long strategy. We've moved in the last 2 years to a lot more retained work. Lots of the projects that we do are now regular recurring revenue, whereas previously, because of the team we had, it was a lot more implementational, a lot more further down the food chain. Whereas now I think we are getting to the holy grail, and that is being paid to think, not paid to do, which is a really good place to be for any agency model business. I
Mhm.
also think, from a production standpoint, we are really well equipped to do lots of short form social video content that's best in class and really effective. And we've got the right amount of data now to say that works well on that platform. So, yeah, we're building trust, we're building an authoritative position.
Yeah. And diving into what you're just saying about the data too. I've been listening to other podcasts, and they've been talking about the data, the analytics, and how many hours it takes to actually know what's going on. But by the time you do, it kind of changes. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Hugely. So it's funny, before one of my big tips was an understanding of technology and its limitations. I think exactly the same can be said for data, an understanding of what data can tell you, but also what it can't tell you. Um, yeah, we're working with a new client right now, and we are looking at their social analytics, and we are learning about the different audiences that they are talking to across different platforms. And it's been quite illuminating. but it doesn't tell you what a good idea is to engage those audiences. So what data can do is give you a good benchmark on what success looks like. What data can do is give you a good historical perspective. But the one thing I would say is lots and lots of people in marketing functions are very, very interested in the status quo, keeping things the same. And a lot of people in business are very interested in keeping things the same. Now, sometimes that's for the good. You know, I'm pleased that millions of pounds every year get spent on TV because depending on what counts as TV, it's still a very, very important medium and a very valuable medium. But without people shaking stuff up, you wouldn't get any innovation, any seismic shift. And remember, data can only look backwards, it can't necessarily look forwards. We sort of have a rule with our brands that we work with on a retained basis that 10% of their budget will go into testing and learning. And that's really good for them. And it's really good for us as well, because it means we can trial stuff. We can find out what stuff works. That could be something really simple. We've just taken a brand from major radio to podcasts. We've just taken another brand who had never been on TikTok to trialing TikTok for the first time. But it's really good because it opens their eyes and it gives them a benchmark of what that channel, what that creative could start to deliver. So, yeah, that's how I'd respond to the data quandary.
Yeah, yeah. I like how you said that quandary. It is
Mm.
quandary because it definitely is one of those big dark holes.
Oh, you can get data to tell you anything.
Yeah.
The most effective advert in the world is something written on the side of a bar that says buy your drinks here.
Mhm.
Because so therefore that's all of the traffic that have come to the bar have seen that ad, and then that could be how you interpret that piece of data.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a little bit of common sense that goes on with interpreting data. So yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow, wow. This has been definitely, definitely, definitely riveting. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you and your social media handles?
Of course, I'm on X a lot less these days, as I think lots of people are, but you can find me there, James Erskine, Erskine. I do talk about work there, but actually, the best place probably to get me is on LinkedIn. And if you want to find out more about Rocket, go to wearerocket.co.uk. That acts as a gateway to both the UK business and the Dubai business. And I'm really happy to have conversations with people about day-to-day marketing challenges, but also things more broadly. I'm very lucky. Over time, I've built up a couple of opportunities where I talk quite regularly across the BBC about social media. And I'm really happy to talk issues pertaining to my social media technology. And I'd love to have a conversation. So get in touch.
Love it, love it. James, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I look forward to future conversations with you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks so much for the podcast as well. I've become a real avid listener. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you.